What do we do first here? Chairman the quorum, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Director Gloria Gray.
You on the air?
Here.
Thank you. Director Tommy Favai. Director Desi Alvarez.
Here.
Director Scott Houston.
Here.
President John Deere.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Is there any public comments?
Mr. President, we have not received any requests for public comment, though this meeting is being held both in person and virtually. If there's any member of the public that would like to speak, please indicate so by raising your virtual hand or raising your hand here in the room.
Okay, we'll go on to discussion items. 4A.
Yes, Mr. President. Item 4A is a presentation on the operational shift cost offset program. And for this presentation, we do have Jessica Arm, program manager, Victor Galvez, team manager, and Randy Chow, operations planning and programs for Metropolitan Water District. So take it away.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Victor Galvez. I'm with Metropolitan Water District. I'm the operations team manager, and I oversee compliance over at Metropolitan Water District, and I ensure that Metropolitan is always meeting state and federal regulations or exceeding. So just want to introduce to you all the presentation today is an operational shift cost offset program. It'll be presented by myself first, and then followed by Randy Chow, my colleague over in operations planning, and then Jessica Arm will actually go into the OSCOT program and what that entails. So just a couple brief overview here. Again, I'm going to go over nitrification and Metropolitan's distribution system, and then I'll give you a little bit of background on that. Impacted areas in our system that are currently impacted by nitrification and are frequently impacted by nitrification. And then some of the control measures that we have in place right now to control nitrification in our system. And then after I'm done with my portion of the presentation, Randy Chow will come up and give us an overview of demands at Metropolitan. And then Jessica Arm will come in and close us out with an overview of the operational shift cost offset program, or as you guys all know, OSCOT. So just a quick background on me real quick. So I have an operations background. I'm a licensed civil engineer in the state of California, but I'm also a grade 4 water treatment operator in the state of California. And I just passed my T5 examination also. So you're getting a very well qualified person here to give you this presentation, although I'm not big on the chemistry stuff. So I probably want to save those for the end.
On behalf of the board, we congratulate you on your achievements.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. So just a background here on nitrification. Naturally occurring nitrifying bacteria are always present in chloraminated systems. It's just the way it goes when you're on chloramines, which is a combination of free chlorine and ammonia. So what you'll have is a combined chlorine in the system that establishes your disinfection residual. And the sequence or sequentially, it gets converted from ammonia to nitrate. That's the reaction. That ultimately you end up with nitrate. If you get that in your distribution system, you don't want that because that means you've let the nitrification go too far. So we usually only work with nitrite and nitrite at very low levels. So you'll go from ammonia to nitrite. That's usually where we see it in the system. Hardly ever see it as nitrate. Usually the nitrite's gone because it's all been converted over and oxidized and it becomes nitrate. And by then it's too late. You've reacted too late on that. Some of the conditions that influence nitrification: long detention times, dead end configurations and distribution systems, excess free ammonia, and low disinfectant residuals. And the reason why I bring up these four here is because right now, with the lower demands being the new normal, we're just conserving way too good. We're seeing higher water age in the system, and those equate to longer detention times. And so that allows the water to warm up in the pipe, and that accelerates the nitrification process. So, any temperatures at 20 degrees Celsius, you would probably know it is about 70 degrees Celsius, Fahrenheit. Anything about there and above, you start to really accelerate that process to go from, the ammonia over to nitrite. And then what that does is that ends up, impacting our disinfectant residual, because nitrite is an inorganic substance. So what that does is it creates a demand on our disinfectant residual, and so that is our main focus. There are MCLs for nitrite. I think it's 1 milligram per liter is a maximum contaminant level for nitrite, but we never get that high. And so we're not concerned with toxicity levels of nitrite in a distribution system, where we're more focused on controlling the acceleration of nitrite and nitrite levels, because it'll impact our disinfectant residual, which we need to maintain at a certain level in order to meet state and federal regulations. And here's just an overview of our system, and I'm hoping the folks that are on the call can see this if they're on their laptops. If not, I apologize. But here is a overview of our system, in the areas that it is vulnerable to nitrification, and mostly in the terminus areas of our system. As I explained earlier, dead end configurations is where nitrite tends to develop, because we don't have a lot of demand at the dead ends of our system here as a wholesaler. So right now, our current challenge is low demand and higher temperatures, which leads to elevated nitrate at several of the terminus in our system. So like I said, the trigger is probably about 70 degrees Fahrenheit in water temperature, and you'll start to see that process, that biological process, accelerate into nitrite. Some of the control measures that we have in place now, we start off with increased monitoring. So right now at Metropolitan, we send out a map every week, and we'll monitor the nitrite levels 1 time a week. But when we start to see our nitrite levels increasing to a level of concern in the distribution system, which is still a very low level, we start to take actions. And so one of our first actions is increasing the monitoring. So we'll start monitoring every other day. And as it starts to go up even higher, then we start monitoring every day. And we'll collect samples every day. And we have a team of patrollers that are solely dedicated to collecting samples in the distribution system, and not only for compliance and routine samples, but also these special ad hoc samples as needed. Another step we have right now is optimize the system and decrease water age when feasible. So we work with our control room up at Eagle Rock, and they make all the system operational changes, and we identify areas of high water age when feasible, and we'll make operational changes and shifts to our system to minimize the water age in our pipes. So we're very proactive about that, which is why we shift first to increased monitoring, because you want to confirm that there is an issue and then take action once you confirm the issues. And then we do follow-up sample just to make sure that the operational change we implemented was effective. And then lastly, we have another measure right now, which is actually being implemented now. It's in place now. Our Weymouth, Deemer, and Jensen plants, they feed this area of town we call in-basin, or the central pool is what we call it at Metropolitan. But our Jensen plant up in Granada Hills, they're up in the left. We also have the Weymouth plant up in Laverne, and then we have the Deemer plant in Yorba Linda. And those 3 plants together satisfy the demands in what we call the in-basin area of the LA region. So what we do is we increase the chlorine residual target, leaving those treatment plants. And it used to be, 2.5 milligrams per liter was our target. And then as the demand started to drop out, we started to see the water age increasing in our system. So our new normal now is 2.7 milligrams per liter. And then as an action against combating these lower levels, we go ahead and we increase that target to 2.9 during the nitrification season, which is summertime. So what we're doing now, some of the control measures in progress, is we're installing water quality analyzers in all those vulnerable areas that you just saw right now of our system, so that we get real-time continuous monitoring of that system and the water quality in the area of the system. We use existing hydraulic models to predict the chlorine levels in the system, and that helps us identify areas where we may need to decrease the water age in the future. So this predicts the water age based on what we predict for the demands. Currently, we have some sodium hypochlorite feed systems that are being installed all throughout in basin. And what that does is that enhances the chlorine levels in the distribution system. And that helps control the naturally occurring bacteria that we would find in the distribution system. And by minimizing that, you have less of a potential for that biological process to take place where you form the nitrite, which would impact the disinfectant residuals. So right now, one of our main the chlorine systems that we're rolling out is being installed here on 108th Street, just up here, just up the road from Palos Verdes Reservoir. And that should help us with one of the areas that we're challenged by right now. And Uzi's very familiar with that right now. Another step that we take, optimizing proactive control measures. Right now, as I told you, we are looking at 2.9 milligrams per liter, and that's what we're implementing now. But we are looking at increasing that chlorine residual even more. But we have to balance that with formation of disinfectant byproducts and other undesirable water quality consequences of increasing that chlorine target. So we have to strike a balance between the two. So we're continuing to evaluate increasing that chlorine target. And then lastly, we continue to refine our communication plan. And we really have to emphasize that we're not as much concerned with the toxicity of nitrite and nitrification as we are with controlling the amounts of nitrite in the distribution system to maintain a stable chlorine residual. So maintaining a stable chlorine residual is the driver for nitrification control at Metropolitan. And just a quick summary here on my update for water quality. Nitrification is a common challenge for agencies using chloramines. It's been since the beginning of time. Nitrification is becoming a more frequent issue with extended periods of reduced demand. And here at Metropolitan, we continue to expand, our knowledge of member agency operations during nitrification events, and we'll leverage this knowledge to develop and refine our long-term approaches to improve nitrification control overall for not just ourselves, but for the region and our customers. And then, continued coordination with our member agencies is essential to producing regionally beneficial solutions that minimize the impacts of nitrification. And, I've worked with Uzi quite a bit and very closely, and that's why we're here today to look at some of the options that we may have to help the region out with water quality issues. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll turn it over to Randy Chow, and he'll go ahead and go over the demand summary. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Randy Chow with the Metropolitan Operations Planning and Programs team. We work on analyzing member agency demands, strategically managing and forecasting Metropolitan's water surplus and drought conditions, and operations as well. And as Victor mentioned, lower demands have been a challenge operationally for Metropolitan with increased water age, more stagnant water in our pipelines, and increased temperatures. Our distribution system does become more susceptible to potential nitrification, specifically at the pipeline terminuses as Victor mentioned in our area. So we call the common pool, or also known as like central pool. They're kind of used interchangeably. Specifically at the pipeline terminuses, so you can see on the map kind of West Coast feeder, the West Basin feeder, areas around the PV reservoir and the PV feeder, and also some pockets of the second lower feeder. And we kind of identify the common pool as the service area of, or group of service connections that can take treated water from our Jensen plant, our Weymouth plant, and our Deemer plant. So you can kind of see on the map here, kind of highlighted in the blue blob. Yeah, that's what we refer as to the common pool. So here is a graph of our historical demands in the common pool for the month of July for the last 40 plus years. Demand, you can see in this graph that demands in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, the average was well above 800 CFS per day in the month of July. But now you can see highlighted in orange, the current consumptive demands in the common pool is trending well below 600 acre feet per day. Some member agencies have identified decrease in metropolitan and overall demand due to several groundwater wells returning back into service and utilizing more local supply and relying on more in-region storage. So additionally, there has been an increase in conservation measures and the need to reduce demands to meet future state requirements, such as the urban water use objectives. So overall, the record low demands from Metropolitan has played a critical factor in water age and potential nitrification. And this is where Metropolitan has identified that modifications to the OSCOP program can be an effective management tool to address some of the needs and water quality concerns that Victor has mentioned here. I'll pause here for any questions on any of the events.
I mean, the orange one, what does that entail? I mean,
That's current of 2026. Yeah,
so right where we're at this
Yes,
moment.
currently.
You know, it seemed like a dumb question, but I was like, wait a minute, just double, triple checking because we're still partway through the year and on and on, right?
Yeah.
But it is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
How much less water using.
Yeah, so you can see on the map, this is the record low of the lowest since we started tracking our demands in the 1980s and 1970s. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Okay, I will pass it off to Jessica to go into depth on the OSPAP program.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Arm, and I manage Metropolitan's OSCOP program. So I'll give a quick overview. OSCOP actually was used by Metropolitan from 2021 to 2023 during that prolonged drought. And at the time, we had limited state water project supplies. So we were really trying to preserve those supplies. And our board authorized OSCOP for member agencies to shift their state water project supplies over to Colorado River supplies. And so through those actions that our member agencies took, we preserved about 90,000 acre feet of state water project supplies. And to compensate the member agencies for making that shift, we did provide a credit through OSCOP that covered any incurred costs that the member agencies faced for shifting that connection. And when our Table A allocation increased in 2023, we did end the OSCOP program. And so since then, OSCOP has not been active or authorized by Metropolitan. But this recent April, we returned to the board to seek authorization to implement OSCOP on an ongoing basis whenever the need arises. And so our board did approve OSCOP. And instead of just covering the state water project to Colorado River shifts, we included a broader range of scenarios where OSCOP could be used. And so we will still incentivize state water project to Colorado River shifts if that's the case and if that's needed. But we also will use OSCOP if we need some kind of extended shutdown or an emergency shutdown that requires member agencies to voluntarily take some other supply from a different connection. And pertinent to this presentation, we can use OSCOP for water quality issues, such as maybe there's a nitrification event where we're asking the member agency to take more demands off of a specific connection to deal with that water age issue that Victor was talking about. So they might maybe shift demands from one connection to another, or they could even back off of their own local supplies and increase demands from an impacted connection. And then in general, OSCOP could cover just anything that we don't foresee at this time. So OSCOP works very similarly to how it did back during the 2021 to 2023 drought. If a member agency can accommodate a shift, they would submit their costs for incurring that shift to Metropolitan. We would review those costs and compare them to the member agency's baseline costs. So certain things that might count would be, maybe there's increased pumping, maybe they have to buy treated water instead of untreated water, so there's that difference in costs. Our OSCOP credit is capped at the treatment surcharge rate, whatever that rate is in effect at that year. And then we tack on an additional $5 per acre foot to cover any kind of administrative costs. And so this year, the maximum OSCOP credit would be $549 per acre foot. And so OSCOP is something that Metropolitan initiates, and there's a series of criteria in order to receive the credit. So first, the Metropolitan member agency would have to activate or implement OSCOP. And as a precursor to our August board meeting next week, our general manager has authorized the implementation of OSCOP this year. So we'll be reporting that to our board next week. And that's specifically for nitrification issues. So the general manager this year has approved. And the next step would be for Metropolitan to reach out to the member agency and request if they could accommodate a connection change. And so if you're a member agency and we have reached out to you, then we would ask, can you shift your demands from one source to another? And this isn't about just taking more water than you otherwise would have taken. It's truly a shift. So there has to be an offset of those supplies. It can't just be, oh, okay, we'll take more water and pay it at a lower cost because we get the credit. There has to be a true shift. And so if there can be a shift, we would look over the member agency's costs and determine if their costs are higher than if they would have just taken their supplies as they normally do. And if the answer is yes, then that member agency is very likely to qualify for an OSCOP credit. And just one additional consideration is that this is all on a calendar year basis. So if a member agency funds some kind of project so that they could take supplies from one service connection, those costs will only be counted in that year's credit. So this year, let's say you spend $1 million to take water from some connection. Next year, we won't count that $1 million. It's only for this year's OSCOP credit. And so a member agency and Metropolitan could enter into an OSCOP agreement at any time, even if the general manager has not activated the program. And this just helps speed things along so that when we do implement the program, we're able to start that evaluation process much faster. Once we implement OSCOP, we would request or reach out to the member agencies to see if they could accommodate the shift. We would review their costs. And then once we've determined the OSCOP credit, the member agency and Metropolitan would enter into a letter agreement that documents the estimated shift amount, the schedule, and then that credit. And after that letter agreement is signed, then we could start the shifts. And so the member agency would certify the shifted amount each month. They would be billed at the water rate for all Metropolitan deliveries, but we would apply the OSCOP credit to their monthly invoice. And then each year, we would have to evaluate what those actual costs were and what the actual shifted amounts were. And we'll do an annual reconciliation that will be completed by the end of the following year. So if, let's say West Basin performs some shifts in 2026, then we would do the final 2026 reconciliation by December of 2027. And so this is just to reiterate that this is a Metropolitan initiated program. This program wasn't intended for member agencies to reach out to Met. So that's just important to consider. So in summary, we went back to the board to receive authorization so that we could use OSCOP to implement regional flexibility. We could enter into OSCOP agreements at any time with any member agency, and it doesn't really commit that member agency to take any action. You could have the agreement and then just never use it. We will implement OSCOP as needed for specific service connections, and Metropolitan does determine the credit. And once we have that credit, we'll enter into a letter agreement and perform the reconciliation by the end of the following year. And so this is just one tool that could be used to help incentivize member agencies to help Metropolitan out with our own water quality needs. So as Victor was mentioning, some of the tools that his operations team uses, we have this other tool that's more on the administrative side that we could also use to combat nitrification. And yeah, if you have any questions later on, here's my contact information. So reach out to me for any OSCOP related questions. And then all three of us are happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Jessica, if I understood that previous slide correctly, the member agency can have a kind of an umbrella agreement for OSCOP with Met that may or may not ever get used, but then on an incident by incident case, a letter agreement would define the terms of that specific request.
Yeah, so the OSCOP agreement, the umbrella agreement, wouldn't even have to specifically only cover nitrification scenarios. It could cover, you know, if we had some shutdown and we were reaching out to you for that, it could cover that. And so all of those details of each OSCOP scenario would be outlined in the letter agreement.
I understand that our staffs have been working together to understand these opportunities. The question I have, which is starting to escape. It's gone.
You're gonna ask if staff's doing a great job.
Nope, that didn't help. I will come back.
All right.
I have a question for you, Jessica.
Before you do, Scott, would you take over the chairmanship?
I'd like to take a break. I will happily do that. Okay, go ahead, Director Alvarez.
So this is gonna come back to the board, I guess, next week. For this year, what time period is this gonna be activated for?
So it was activated by our general manager, I would say maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago. And for the board, per the board authorization, we have to just report that it's been activated to our board. So that will be next week. And the general manager could then decide at his own discretion when to stop OSCOP for that given year. So it's really based on when Victor tells us there are no longer any nitrification needs. Usually, I think, Victor, that's around October, November, that usually the temperatures decrease. Correct me
These
if I'm wrong.
days, yeah, I mean, these days it's going all year long. It's based on the water temperatures.
So then once those temperature issues go away, then our general manager would give an official notice that it's no longer able to be implemented.
Okay, so it's gonna be for about 4 months.
Yes. In the future, that might change. So in the future, I think Victor has said that we could see something from May all the way through November.
Go ahead.
Right. Eric,
I remember the rest of my question. So I know our staffs are talking about this program, the opportunity. What does the request from Metropolitan look like? Is it in writing? Is it a letter, just an email request staff to staff? Like, how does that formally work?
You know, I don't think we have a specific procedure in place yet, but I would say that our last meeting that we had with you all could be the request.
And
But we could send you an official email.
that's exactly what I was getting at.
Okay.
Have we been requested or have we not? So yeah, maybe we can follow up on.
Okay.
go ahead.
Question, maybe a little more sensitive, but when you have to do flushing and that water is just, I'd say wasted, but just going out and storm drains or wherever it's going, that's really, in a sense, lost water unless you're an animal in that area, I guess. So is there any discussion on if you can utilize this water versus flushing it, which has no cost recovery, so even a better incentive for some agencies to utilize that water, maybe a little enhanced from some of these. Has there been any of that discussion?
I can feel that. So it really is location dependent. So, you know, there are some areas that are prohibitive of flush. So, you know, you'd really have to look at, you know, just whether or not we're even able to flush. Most of the locations that we are flushing at now have a channel nearby, or, you know, and there isn't really a place, you know, where we could ask, you know, 2 or 3 different agencies to come on at the same time to get the same volume. So that's why it really just depends on the nitrate levels we're seeing in the system. And if there is an opportunity like that, absolutely, you know, but again, my call, you know, is just to identify the location and the area and the need. But really that decision would be made at a much higher level to entertain that kind of a request. So, but I mean, it has been discussed, just not in any way where we would look into implement yet. Yeah.
And then in terms of like the higher rate, so OSCOP was intended to make the member agencies just whole. So it would, our goal is to make sure that you would be paying the same amount, whether you did OSCOP or not. And so for us, the advantage of OSCOP is that that flushing water could be used by the member agency. But in terms of the higher rate, OSCOP is only authorized to pay the cap.
Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, quick question on kind of, I guess, more on the umbrella versus the individual letter. Do you expect the letters to last for a year long? Kind of what, I'm not sure what constitutes an event, I guess, is my question. Because sometimes it seems to go back and forth, and I'm sure no one here really wants to have to do a letter every 2 weeks after the levels die down a little and then pop right back up.
Yeah, and I don't think our general manager wants to activate and deactivate OSCOP all year either. So I think it would last, I think, as long as the need for shifting goes away. And maybe I'll pass it over to you, Victor, but I think you had mentioned to me before that there, you know, you might flush and then not flush. And that, so there might be those little waves, but we would kind of keep it on until the permanent need for flushing went away for that year. So there would be one per year, a letter agreement per year in which OSCOP has been activated. And maybe you could speak more about those waves.
Yeah. So, you know, depending on where in the system we identify areas where if we had a certain amount of flow at this dead end location, you know, we can decrease the nitrate levels for a period of time. But obviously, once you stop flowing at that rate, then the nitrate starts to increase. And I think right now what we're looking into and evaluating is how long that time period is. So we're still in the evaluation period. But safe to say that as long as we had that umbrella in effect and active during the nitrification season, which is between May, and it used to be for me October. Now it's turning into November, and then maybe in 5 years that'll be December. And then it'll be all year. But right. Yeah. True. Right. Yeah. So, you know, that's, I'd say, you know, between May and November is safe, you know, because we're not usually ever going to use flushing or OSCOP in February, unless, you know, we have a really bad issue. I think would be outside of our control. Yeah, it is all based on demands. More, you know, and again, our system was designed for, you know, a time period when we were, you know, having 2 million acre feet a year, 2.2 million acre feet a year. Now we're down to, I think it's like 1.4, 1.5. And, you know, that has a big impact on the water reach. And that's what makes it challenging to manage.
And then, sorry, I have one more.
Go ahead.
So for the reconciliation process that you said is the year after, I just want to confirm that that means that you could be getting either a bill or a credit during not that budget cycle anymore.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Director Albert. So, and this may be for Randy or Victor. So you're really targeting kind of the dead end of the system when you are going out and offering the OSCOT program. Have you identified the agencies that you'd be targeting?
Yes.
It's, you just showed the common pool, but the real issue is kind of the dead end where you don't have enough circulation.
Yeah. So we do have a list of agencies that we would be approaching on the OSCOT, and so West Basin being one of them.
Yeah, Richard West End.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is our first kind of attempt at approaching, an agency and showing you about the OSCOT program and talking a little bit about the water quality issues and just so that it's available.
And so as a result of the modeling studies that you guys do and so on, are you targeting a certain amount of water or are you gonna leave it more open-ended?
For the hydraulic model, it's based, so the hydraulic model is a complex model. It's tied to our SCADA system. So it gets real-time demand information from SCADA. And by demand information, I mean meter reads. And every 15 minutes it gets updated. And then it calculates a water age. And our standard at Metropolitan is to try to stay within a 72-hour or less time frame. So we don't want any molecule of water to be in the pipe for more than 3 days. Otherwise, we need to try to move it, or we need to try to get more flow to that part of the system. And the dead ends or terminus of our pipes is usually where, our water age gets up to, sometimes 5 to 6 days. So if we can keep that to 3 by having a constant flow on that facility, then that'll decrease the nitrate levels because we're minimizing water age.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No other questions? Well, that was an excellent presentation. We really appreciate all the information you brought to us. Ton of information. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, Director.
Thank you for coming. All three. Okay. Thanks.
Yes, President Deere, the next item that we have is under 4B. It's an assessment of the direct potable reuse implementation strategies for Pure Water Southern California. And for this presentation, we do have Gloria Y. Blumel from our program manager, and Matt Hacker, the Water Resources Team Lead on Pure Water Southern California and Metropolitan Water District. So I'll hand it off to Matt.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It was a great presentation by this group, and I'm not going to list all my credentials for you, like Victor does, but I think you can find those elsewhere. We did give a much longer version of this presentation that ended up being 3 hours 2 weeks ago from today at our board workshop. I will spare you from doing that. There also is a technical memorandum that is part of this presentation as well. So Gloria and I will do like a 20-minute version here for you today. Just a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today. We'll be doing an update on the DPR planning aspects. We'll be talking about raw water augmentation and treated water augmentation, address the key findings of the study that we did over the past 12 to 18 months. And we'll also be looking at future study needs. It's a good thing that Victor talked about nitrification because it'll come up in my presentation and Gloria's. So it's a good thing now you all understand nitrification. And then we'll answer any of your questions, of course, afterwards. So just to clarify, raw water augmentation includes starting at the advanced water purification facility, going to a drinking water treatment plant like Weymouth or Deemer, and then going into the treated water distribution system. For treated water augmentation, that starts at the advanced water purification facility and goes directly to one of our treated water feeders, such as the second lower feeder, for example. Some of the benefits of doing raw water augmentation versus doing treated water augmentation. Raw water augmentation does allow for your water quality to be distributed over a larger area, so you get a more consistent water quality, like what Victor talked about, maintaining a lot of that water quality throughout our system. Raw water augmentation is better for that. Treated water augmentation gives you less pipeline. So while you may have pockets of different water quality throughout the system, you do have less pipeline potentially to get to each one of the treated water augmentation facilities. So that gives us a little bit of a benefit for that. All right, so I'm going to walk you through the map here. In the black on the lower end is at the sanitation district's AK Warren facility. We'll be having the advanced water purification facility, AWPF, shown there in the black. The lighter blue is our proposed backbone pipeline, which would go along and drop off water for our indirect potable reuse users. That's for the member agencies deliveries there. And it would go all the way up to potentially doing raw water augmentation all the way up at our Weymouth plant, which would then, through an existing pipeline, be able to go to Deemer. So from this location, I'll show you a map here in a second that'll show kind of where that would go. So we also have here, and I'll walk through each one of these here with you, which would be the treated water augmentation at the second lower feeder. That's right here within West Basin system. And then we also looked at treated water augmentation at the middle feeder for each one of those. So we have the 3 DPR options: TWA at the second lower, TWA at the middle feeder, and then RWA at Weymouth. So those are the 3 that we generally evaluated through this whole study. So I'll talk about demand projections. This is your favorite topic, I'm sure, talking about how we came up with and how we evaluated the study. So we did do a Monte Carlo demand simulation model. So what's a Monte Carlo simulation? It is a computational model that uses multiple sampling to come up with a range of possibilities. Why we might want to do this here, it does help us assess the risk and uncertainty related to DPR. What's the full range of what you might be looking at for DPR? And it's a common practice for what we might do in water resources. Metropolitan's integrated resources plan and our Camp for Water process use a similar Monte Carlo simulation process. We had 16 different factors that we evaluated. So ultimately this is perfect for Monte Carlo simulation modeling. We had 16 different varying factors. And I'll just kind of walk through kind of the general categories of each one of those. First of all is member agency demands. What would those look like for each of our member agencies, including West Basin's demand on the system? Our water treatment plant demands. So that would primarily be for raw water augmentation. And then we'd have our treated water system either at the second lower feeder or at the middle feeder. We then layered on top of all that different hydrology, wet, dry, extreme dry events, earthquake events on top. We also added the integration issues that you might have when you're inserting into a feeder, how that might be integrated together. And also really looked at downtime. How does that work? What assumptions should we make regarding downtime? Things we did not look at in this study. And Victor, these are all your categories: water age, nitrification, some of the treatability at the treatment plant. So if we were to do raw water augmentation for our final phase, what does that do to the water quality? And would we still have good treatability at Weymouth and Deemer? And there would also be hydraulic concerns within the central pool. So glad Randy showed us the central pool figure, because I don't have to show it to you now.
Can I ask real quick?
Yeah.
What exactly does downtime entail?
So downtime would, and I do have a slide about this coming up, but it's basically how much time you're going to be offline for different factors. So there may be times, for example, when injection wells will be down for maintenance, or you're going to have the facility will be down for maintenance. Right. So we have to make certain assumptions about that. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about downtime.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. I think I have a slide coming up. Oh, I may have jumped ahead of that, but that's okay. So there are 7 partners that have proposed to use purified water. These are the 7 agencies. This would show the range of demands that each one of those would get. You can see here West Basin has the highest proposed demand off of the pure water system. Also in the yellow circle is the median or the 50th percentile. So that gives you a good idea of the potential range. And when you have all of these individually, you got to figure out how you're going to put all that together. And this is kind of where this Monte Carlo simulation takes all the ranges and puts it in together into a range that you can really look at. This map shows you where currently, if we were to take water up for raw water augmentation, where that water would go today. And as you can see, it's most of that central pool area. If we had our drought project, our future Venice Sepulveda pump station project, which Metropolitan has begun construction on that. And as we move forward with that, you'll be able to get all the way up to Jensen from Weymouth or Deemer locations. And this would serve 22 of the 26 member agencies. Not saying that the other 4 agencies aren't benefiting. It just means we're getting direct deliveries to 22 of the 26 member agencies. This is Director Alvarez's favorite option here, which would be to go to the second lower feeder. If we went to the second lower feeder, this shows you where that water would actually move to directly. And then if we had the future Venice Sepulveda pump station project online, that could get all the way up to Jensen. This would serve 18 of the member agencies. But again, not saying that not everybody would benefit, just that we'd have 18. And then this would be where the water would go from the middle feeder. If we were to do that, this one would give you 13 of the options. But again, everybody would benefit if we brought it up to the middle feeder. So this gives you kind of the overall where the water goes, how that would be impacted in the system. Again, this would be providing water quality benefits to this region here in West Basin in particular. Most of that area is West Basin. But then some of the other areas, there may be different water qualities in different parts of the system. So that's something Victor's going to have to help us evaluate. All right, so this shows you how we ultimately came up with a whole bunch of scenarios as we went through the evaluation, looked at a whole bunch of probabilistic calculations. And so ultimately we ended up with, for IPR or for those member agency uses, you would be somewhere between 50 and 150 MGD with a median of 105 MGD. I've also shown you here the 30th and 90th percentiles on this figure, which shows you that overall, most of the time you're in a small range that you're going to be operating. Only during the extremes when you may have an earthquake or an extreme dry event or an extreme wet event that might push you into either edge of that. The raw water augmentation option would be from 0 to 60 MGD with a median of 30 MGD. The TWA at the second lower feeder would be from 0 to 100 MGD with a median of 45 MGD. And then at the middle feeder, you'd be from 0 to 100 with 60 MGD. So in the key takeaways for my part of the presentation before I pass it over to Gloria, this shows you the range of options that you could look at. So if you're looking for, she's going to be putting together scenarios that would evaluate how you might, which direction you might go. Do you want to go high IPR where we're going to serve mostly the member agencies, or do you want to go low member agencies and serve mostly to TWA or RWA? This gives you that full flexibility, and she'll walk through some of the options that we went through in this study. In general, IPR could go up to about 150 for its maximum, but then it's on the low end at the 30th percentile, you're going to be at 90 MGD. So somewhere between 90 and 150. If you really wanted to go low, you could be lower around the 50 MGD range. For your raw water augmentation at Weymouth and Deemer, again, you're 60 MGD. And if you want to go at the lower end, that's about 25 MGD. The second lower feeder and the middle feeder would both be a maximum of 100. But again, 90% of the time you're at 75. So when you're going to design the overall program, you would be thinking about not 100, but at 75. And at some point you would push that. And Gloria is going to walk through that with you in a little bit. All of our scenarios do include a seismic event, and we will need additional studies to look at nitrification, treatability at the treatment plants, as well as hydraulic limitations within the central pool. So all of those, Gloria is going to walk through exactly what we're going to look through, but that concludes my part, and we'll pass it on to Gloria. We'll save all the questions till the very end.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. It's going to be good.
okay. Good afternoon, everyone, the board directors. So you probably have heard a lot of it, and Matt was able to cover his slides in more than 10 minutes, but it may take me a little longer. But thanks to
Uh-oh. There we go.
okay, thanks to Matt and my metropolitan colleagues to kind of build up the case for me. So there are a lot of background that has been covered. So I will start with this slide that kind of Matt already covered the low, medium, and high scenario. So I'm just gonna show you this matrix we developed for all the potential DPR implementation, including the baseline, which is our RWA, that's the very left one. And one alternative scenario that we decided not to cover is the scenario 2, the TWA at Weymouth, but we don't have enough time, so we're gonna skip why we did that. And we can also do TWA at our feeders, as what Matt mentioned earlier. And the difference would be just the treatment locations and the process trains we'll be considering. And subsets of each scenario were also developed to cover the demand ranges and the feeder locations. So we don't have time to go through all the DPR treatment trains today. Just very briefly, the regulatory prescribed the DPR treatment train, which we call the default train, can only be accommodated at the AWPF with Pure Water's current configuration, because it needs to take place before the reverse osmosis process. And other potential post-RO alternative trains could be considered at a satellite treatment facilities. So over a dozen of these scenarios were developed, and some were even analyzed. Many were screened out as infeasible or would have significant challenges. So ultimately, we narrowed down this down to just a handful to show our due diligence and also still stay focused on the analysis. So besides RWA, I think I'm just gonna move forward because I think Matt already talked a lot about it. So you can find more details. Like what Matt said, we have a draft TM that went out with our board letter. So if you're interested, please take a look at the draft TM. And I will show the representative scenarios in the next 4 slides. Is there a faster way to, okay, here. This maps include the location of the treatment, the needed conveyance with a color-coded pipe size, the potential seasonal max and median demands, and the feeders that may be receiving the water within Metropolitan's distribution system. So this first one is the baseline with RWA at Weymouth and Demer. Delivery of IPL water to Weymouth would be through the 84-inch backbone pipeline showing dark blue, followed by either the existing Azusa pipeline showing orange or a new dedicated pipeline showing in green. And water treated at satellite facility to DPR level can be delivered from the Weymouth plant to Demer via the existing Yovalinda feeder, showing gray here on the very right. The feeders that could potentially receive purified water are shown in the lighter shade of blue in the background, which is essential metropolitan central pool that Victor, so I don't have to really say anymore. Okay, so this second scenario considers treating the IPL quality water at a satellite facility near the tie-in at the second lower feeder. we could potentially deliver about 75 MGD medium flow in a high TWA demand scenario presented earlier. Since the second lower feeder is bidirectional, water could potentially reach Orange County, as you can see on the map. And this water could potentially also reach San Fernando Valley, but it's just not shown here on this map. The rest of the water would go up north to the groundwater recharge basins. A smaller pipeline, say 54-inch diameter, would be sufficient for this delivery. Is this one better? I think this better button. This is a similar sub-scenario, considering sending DPR treated water to the middle feeder. We would also potentially deliver about 75 MGD medium flow in a high TWA demand scenario. We could take advantage of the Garvey Reservoir to provide some engineered buffer capacity. Under this scenario, more feeder could receive the water as shown in the lighter shade of blue here as compared to the earlier version. Water could also potentially reach San Fernando Valley. It's just not shown here. The backbone pipe size would be 78 inches in this case too for the water delivery. Okay, scenario 4 includes several subsets. We could site all needed treatment at the AWPF using either the regulatory prescribed default DPR train or an alternative train in this case. This would eliminate the need for a satellite facility. We could also separate the IPR and DPR treatment at the AWPF and deliver purified water via separate pipelines. Okay, so this map shows the scenario integrating IPR and DPR treatment. So the delivery will be in one pipeline. TWA connection would be, in this case, at the second lower feeder, and the backbone pipe size would be 54 inches. Additional maps and analysis you can find in the TM if you're interested to look at other scenarios. Okay, engineer buffer with sufficient capacity would be really crucial for TWA implementation to provide needed response time as well as surge protection for our feeders. We provided some buffering capacity at the AWPF clear well in our conceptual design. And also, however, we still need more capacity to allow emergency response and operational flexibility. At this time, we have not really located a feasible location site large enough to accommodate the capacity that's needed. So we actually end up analyzing our existing reservoirs to see whether any of them can be feasible to be used for TWA, and such as the Garvey Reservoir along the middle feeder and the Weymouth Finished Water Reservoir. The Palos Verdes Reservoir along the second lower feeder at the end is at the end of our distribution system and would provide very limited benefits in this case. Garvey Reservoir has the largest capacity for buffer and demand management, but it may have issues with nitrification or limited feeder capacity. Additional study would be needed to further evaluate the potential to use that for TWA. The Weymouth Finished Water Reservoir is not ideal because it is far away. It's 12 miles from the backbone pipeline, so you need to build more conveyance. And the reservoir may have a limited ability to handle flow variations. So we need to conduct siting studies to identify additional locations for engineered buffer consideration. Okay, so how much can we save on the conveyance? So this table summarizes the potential impact of TWA on this requirement. Green shows the RWA, the baseline scenario, and blue is generally the TWA options. The IPR and DPR demands for each scenario are shown on the top rows, and our analysis indicate the TWA options would reduce the size for the majority of the pipeline from 84 inches to 54 inches. The bottom three rows indicate the percentage cost impact of pipe size reduction relative to the baseline scenario, which is the green. We could realize about 12 to 13% savings for the capital cost with TWA. And overall, both TWA scenarios will result in a reduced life cycle costs ranging from 3 to 10%. Scenario 4A, the one on the right, generally has a higher cost reduction because all treatment is provided at the AWPF. Therefore, there is no need for a cell life facility, or we need to consider our management. And however, to put a cost comparison in a proper perspective, it should be noted that this cost difference is are largely related to the delta of the conveyance cost. Some of the TWA specific costs, such as the more robust monitoring, off-spec water handling, again, nitrification mitigation, cell life facility, real estate, and engineer buffer, they are not included or currently being addressed. Since all estimates are rough order of magnitude and the analysis is at a very high level, I would advise you to take it, all the numbers with a grain of salt. We did build in some contingencies in our estimate to account for unknowns, but we still need to refine this analysis with additional studies. Okay, this slide shows the impact of different ranges of TWA deliveries to optimize pure water operations, basically balancing IPR and DPR demand under the sub-alternative of scenario 3, which is having the treatment at the cell life facility. You can see as the IPR demand increases, the DPR demand is reduced naturally. So this analysis include both treatment and conveyance cost. We could realize about 12 to 14% of savings for the capital cost with TWA. And all three TWA flow scenarios would result in a reduced life cycle cost. It appears that the low TWA option, which means more IPR, is more cost effective as it would require a smaller cell life treatment facility, would have a higher online factor. So you can, did we show that? Yeah, which is 94% versus 92 or 93. Okay, so this is also a similar analysis based on all treatment at the AWPF without the need of a cell life facility. We could realize about 7 to 13% savings for the capital cost with TWA. All three flow scenarios would result in reduced life cycle costs, and you can see the range is about 5 to 10% there. And interestingly, and it may be counterintuitive against what you may expect, the option that use combined treatment, IPR and DPR train, there you go, to treat the entire 150 MGD flow has the most capital, O&M, and life cycle cost savings. You probably cannot really see it, but then the light green is actually the a DPR process. This is the prescribed. So that's the whole train. And we would put all the water through that train. So that means you're gonna over-treat for IPR, but we would deliver all the water from a single pipeline. So that's what we're showing here. And this is attributed to using one pipeline, like what I said earlier, for both IPR and TWA deliveries. The other options consider separate IPR and DPR treatment trains, but would require dual pipeline for IPR and TWA deliveries. Any questions so far? Because this may be a complicated one, but then basically that's the message there. Now, here are our takeaways from the analysis. We believe both RWA and TWA are feasible for pure water, and there are opportunities for convenience system cost savings with TWA. Our analysis shows that combined IPR and DPR treatment at the AWPF with a single pipeline is more economical than separate treatment with a separate delivery pipelines. And again, we still need to perform more studies to refine the analysis and the cost estimate. And the next one. So to demonstrate the effectiveness of the default train and all, as well as showing the equivalency of the alternative trains, we need to actually build a demonstration facility, and we're about to issue a RFQ for the CMGC contract to add the facility right next to the existing IPR facility at Grace Napolitano Pure Water Innovation Center. So that's showing on the right, the blue. That will be the new demonstration facility for DPR. And this project will be funded by Metropolitan's current biennial budget, as well as the grant funding that we're currently pursuing. We would be able to start the testing in about 2029. Okay, you can see the potential DPR demonstration facility layout in this 3D rendering. We plan to start with a demonstration scale the default treatment train with ozone BAC MF, and this will be in combination with the existing IPR train and 4 pilot scale alternative trains. If we have more time, I'll get into the detail, but here we talked about the study, so we still need to conduct this water quality studies, the hydraulic operational modeling, and so on and so forth. But basically, in addition to the demonstration testing I mentioned earlier, we need to look into other water quality impacts, such as water temperature, nitrogen targets, chemical peat dilution, post-treatment stabilization, corrosion, water agent, and nitrification, like what everybody was talking about earlier. And more hydraulic and operational modeling is needed so we can have a closer look at the blending, engineered storage of spec water, and for treatment residual management. So finally, we need a siting analysis for the potential DPR satellite treatment facility, as mentioned earlier. We will continue with our public outreach effort and include additional DPR information to allow us to move forward. For that, we plan to include a tasting station as part of our demonstration facility addition. Okay, now I'll get to the summary. Here are the preliminary summary. So we think there's a significant IPR demand along the backbone pipeline, so we can meet pure water's ultimate demand based on this analysis. Pure water could move forward with IPR for the initial stage, since the backbone pipeline will support both IPR and DPR implementation scenarios we have identified through this exercise. The conveyance system could be reduced with TWA, resulting in potential cost savings. Lastly, we need to conduct additional studies. I think I already said many times. So now, what's our next steps? We plan to bring an action in early 2027 to seek our board's approval of the CMGC contract for the DPR demonstration facility to advance our DPR research in order to select a DPR process train for regulatory approval. We will also refine the DPR scenarios based on feedbacks from the board, our member agencies, and Pure Water's independent science advisory panel. I mentioned a few times again that the technical studies are needed to further assess water quality and the operational impacts. Finally, we'll continue our public outreach effort. And this concludes our presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
Okay. So, in all the basic scenarios that you presented here, they all involve a pipeline, whether it's gonna be a large diameter pipeline or down to a 56-inch pipeline. And you also can see the point that if we do all the treatment at the Carson facility, that would be cheaper because there's no need for satellite facility. There's also the scenario where there would be no pipeline at all. And that's briefly discussed in the report that you alluded to. But there's not much discussion about it other than to say it's a possibility. Probably it's the least expensive approach and avoids all of the pipeline.
Mhm.
Why do we keep coming back to building the pipelines when we can do the treatment? We can do the default treatment right now, and that qualifies and save all the money in the additional pilot studies, et cetera, and go for direct portable reuse into the central pool. Central pool, low demands 500 million gallons a day. We treat for 150 million gallons a day. You blend in that water. You'd address the nitrification issues from introducing the water into West End. Why are we always continuing to push back on that alternative instead of investigating that alternative?
Well,
Do you want me to answer it?
No, I can start, you can add to it.
Great.
So Director Alvarez, so we originally, the program started as IPR only, now we get into the DPR. But although I say it's a default train, we could consider, but we still have to demonstrate that it works. So before we can really have all the studies that we needed to demonstrate to the regulator, we don't have a straight pathway to DPR yet. So we need to find out how it works with the default and whether we can use any alternative. And currently, what's in our EIR CCAR document is RWA as DPR because that has an additional buffer between the advanced purification facility and the distribution system. That's a little bit safer, and then it can also reach to our entire central pool. But now as we go, we get your comments, and so we are looking into the potential of meeting the demands with DPR, but there are still a lot of questions we have to answer before we can say, let's go with TWA, right? So like a treatability, how much you can blend, what is the hydraulic constraints, so, and also the condition of the pipes, right? So that's actually currently we are looking at, say, the no pipe solution. We are looking at what can be possibly done. So that's actually in progress, but with all the kind of paper exercise we're doing right now, we still need to have the demonstration testing to tell us whether this process will be acceptable, even the default. So, Matt.
Right. So if you had no pipeline, right, and you just went directly to the second lower feeder.
And I say that there is, as Lori just mentioned, there is work to be done.
Right, of course.
In doing that. I usually like to see that investigation and that effort being put in also. And I think that when we look at the overall cost of this thing, the biggest driver in terms of cost is on the pipeline. So we ought to be looking at the alternative to all that pipeline. That's the point.
Yep, understood. Understood. And obviously, I think when we've looked at the cost, it's if you have the full project for RWA, it's 50-50. Treatment is 50%, and the pipeline is about 50%. Right. So
I hate to interrupt you, Matt, but that's a number that keeps changing. If I go back to the February numbers that you gave us on terms of cost and pipeline, treatment cost was probably about 25% of the, and 75% was pipeline cost.
Right, understood, with the sanitation districts taken out, understood.
But yeah, the sanitation district can take on the first. but that's
25%,
really-
right, I know, understood. Understood, so here's my thought. That what we are looking at is an option that would minimize the size of the pipeline to just get the immediate partners within the area. So that's just West Basin, Long Beach, and City of LA, just those, right, to start with. And then you have TWAs right there. It's not very far. So we are looking at that as an option for our initial stage to look at how that all could be there. That would be your minimum pipeline size. So either the member agencies could come to the AWPF, which that'd be zero pipeline, right? And then when we get into phase 2, we'd just be looking at the TWA. And let me just finish my thought here, and then you can respond. And that would give you your overall project. You'd have your full project from there.
But you're still looking at, so like even if you do it in that phasing where you had the 3 agencies or the 3 parties taking the water, you're still looking selectively at providing water to some in the system, as opposed to saying, we're just gonna put it into the central pool and it's gonna benefit all 22 member agencies immediately, as opposed to, because there is that tension of some agencies benefit and some don't, which in theory, everybody will benefit.
Yes, you are going to need some, given the demand within the second lower feeder, there are periods of time when there's really low demand. So we'd have limitations on how much we could do. So you would have an option with the IPR users to be able to make that work. Now, if you go up to Jensen, that does give you more demand to work with.
But that goes back to this whole idea of it being limited in area. From that second lower feeder, you can push water up into the central pool and have access to the Sepulveda feeder basically at the treatment plant.
Right, and once we finish the project, you'll be able to go all the way up to Jensen.
So all that water goes into the system, doesn't need a satellite facility, doesn't need any additional treatment, all the treatment's done at Carson.
Is that the cheapest option though? And I think
That
that's
is probably the most economical option, but we never really focused on just that option.
Understood. And the team is looking at that right now.
A million times.
I understand that. So I will say this, is that there are some limitations during certain periods of time on, even if you went all the way up to Jensen, there are some limitations during certain times where we won't be able to move all that water.
Well, I would like to see the study that shows that that's impossible, because
it's not impossible, but you are going to lose your online percentage. So which will make it more per acre fund. So we're going to be bringing that to you in another workshop here coming up.
Yeah, we have not scheduled that, but then
It's coming soon.
which one is that?
No.
No.
No. We'll probably be in the first part of the year.
Yeah.
We'll come back with that. Okay. All right.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Yes.
Curious, I live up in Palos Verdes, and I've always thought of the Palos Verdes Reservoir as being a stranded asset. In fact, I proposed using it for a skateboard park many times in Palos. But you guys are proposing to use it. How would you use it?
That's an interesting question, because at this time it's at the very end of the distribution, and there's not much demand after that. So we still have to look into how we can best utilize PV reservoir, because it's indeed a stranded asset at this time, but it will require hydraulic modeling and also confirmation of how much water we're going to go to put it through the second lower feeder, right? So then we can do some modeling. But for an engineer buffer, it most beneficial location would be where the pipe intersect with the feeder. So we still have to look at how best to operate a system, because you do need some buffer capacity. What we have at the AWPF Clearwell is not enough. So we're gonna have to identify additional locations in a second lower feeder. PB reservoir is too far down the line from where we start the flow.
I'll stick with the skateboard park.
So there's another way to look at it. Back to this whole idea of taking the water from doing all the treatment at Carson and putting that directly into the system. At that point, the Palos Verdes Reservoir becomes a source point, not an end point. It does provide you with buffer storage. I don't know if the 650 acre feet is going to be sufficient. You may need more. It may be just right. It may be enough, more than enough. I've never seen that analysis either. But if you do that way, that becomes, it's not an end point. It's the beginning of where the water is going to come from. The water comes from two directions there. Water's coming from the Carson plant into the central pool, and the water's coming either from the Jensen plant, if we're going to be treating up there and bringing water in that way, or from Weymouth and the other plants. So we have one new source of water. That's the alternative, and it is briefly mentioned in the report, but it's about 2 lines in discussion.
Because it requires additional analysis. That's why it's 2 lines.
And, you know, everybody says that, well, that it's going to cost them more money than we think it might. It may or may not, but it's not going to cost as much as building out that pipeline. And I think you guys should have gotten the message that there's not a lot of support for pipeline.
You know, we still need some pipeline. It just, we have to make it shorter, right? Because you produce water, you still need some way to get the water to the user, right? Off to the feeder.
Very little pipeline modifications to the existing system may be needed.
Yes.
Yes. This may just be a comment or maybe even a request, but based off of Director Alvarez's comments, and I was looking at the proposal of Pure Water Southern California as a schedule. I'm looking at what it would take for Met to produce that water and put it into the system and be able to utilize it. And my big concern on the treated water augmentation is that it's going to take a massive outreach effort. And I did mention, or I did see, Gloria, in your slides, you talk a little bit about outreach and a tasting station. But treated water augmentation is going to require a whole nother level of outreach and public opinion polling in order for the Met Board to make this decision ultimately, and for agencies to support that. They're going to need to see that there's support within the public. And so I know that Met and your public information team has done an amazing job over the years as far as polling and utilizing consultants to come in, look and see where public opinion is. But I would like us to possibly look to see how we could do more of that in the next year or two. Because if you just kind of look at that schedule, if the board's going to contemplate a DPR project, whether it's raw water augmentation or treated water augmentation, you're going to need that public opinion poll. But if the decision is to go treated water augmentation, that's a massive outreach effort. And I'd like to see kind of what that process would look like or how Matt would implement that.
Yeah, noted. I think, EJ, you're absolutely right. Today's presentation, we skipped the public outreach slides, but in our workshop, we did include. So at this time, our outreach addressed DPR, just probably mostly RWA. So to add the TWA components, it's absolutely necessary to move forward. And that's why we start talking about the tasting station. We're talking to those agencies who already have one in place. For example, Las Virgenes, Orange County. So we are in dialogue with those agencies. So we could do it. Also, WRD has one too. So we are doing our part of research and see how best to incorporate that public messaging on TWA. So thank you for the comments.
Any other questions or comments?
Just to follow up on that, isn't there some effort that can be expended on the public outreach and more tasting stations and just more focus on that whole getting the word out? Maybe we can have a presentation on that in the future.
Yeah, I think actually our external affair has already presented. I don't recall. I think it was a board presentation. Actually, they actually went in detail as far as what they are doing and what their future plan is. But we can definitely provide a future workshop on how we plan to approach that subject.
Okay, thank you very much. You all gave us a very informative presentation to us today. Thank you very much. Are we done with our agenda here?
Yes, we are. I believe that brings us to director's comments and future agenda items.
Are we ready?
I'll just.
Go ahead, Richard.
I just want to say thank you very much for the presentation. I really, really appreciate it. Very informational and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
All right, we are now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen.